Hello and welcome to this e-learning series on transporting radioactive materials, sometimes abbreviated RAM, by ground and air. This series is presented by ICC, the Compliance Center. In this series, we will cover transportation of radioactives under the current hazardous materials regulations of Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations, also known as 49 CFR, and the current IATA Dangerous Goods regulations. At any time, you may stop the program or go back to review material you wish to see again. To complete this training, you will need to have access to the current editions of both of these regulations. There will be quiz questions throughout the presentation instead of at the end of the presentation, which is how we usually administer the quiz. At the end of the presentation, if you could please leave us feedback letting us know if you like the questions throughout the presentation or if you would prefer them to be at the end of the presentation, it would be greatly appreciated. This course has a number of objectives. First, for you to become familiar with the regulations that apply to the transportation of radioactive materials. Second, for you to know your responsibilities under these regulations. And finally, for you to be able to prepare radioactive materials for transport and to offer them for transport by either ground or air. It is recommended that you have access to the Hazardous Materials Regulations and the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations for reference as you complete this program. Part 1 will introduce us to the regulations involved in transportation of hazardous materials and dangerous goods. Part 2 will cover classification and identification of radioactive materials. Part 3 will introduce the use of the Hazardous Materials Table from the Hazardous Materials Regulations. In Part 4, we will discuss packaging requirements, and in Part 5, we will cover the requirements for marking and labeling packages of radioactive materials. In Part 6, we will discuss shipping papers and what type of paperwork is required for shipments of radioactives. Part 7 will cover 3 topics: how to placard radioactive materials in transport, loading requirements and restrictions, and reporting requirements for serious spills. Part 8 will cover the additional requirements for shipping radioactive materials by air using the rules established by the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations, or DGR. Finally, in Part 9, we will do a review of the importance of security during transportation of radioactive materials. What are radioactive materials? They are isotopes of elements that undergo radioactive decay. What we will be looking at is the transportation of radioactive material. An element is defined as a substance that cannot be chemically interconverted or broken down into simpler substances. Elements are primary constituents of matter. Each element is distinguished by its atomic number. For example, uranium's atomic number is 92. This represents the number of protons in the nuclei of an atom of uranium. Please note that each element has a unique number of protons, starting with the element hydrogen, which has 1 proton.